as we get into our finance week, this is how we make millions of dollars, like Luke Smith from Envision Financial has done over the years too. How are you?
I'm good, yourself?
I'm pretty good. Something that I suppose we take for granted, don't we? Pensions.
Well, look, I think, let's take a step back. The real beneficiaries are the winners of the last election, eh?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, but I knew you came in here beaming like,
yeah.
That doesn't look like with the franking credit, that's going to stick around.
Yeah, look, I wasn't smiling because of the weather, I'll give you the hot tip.
Yeah.
Look, great result. I think all of the people over 50 out there should be, opening some champagne. And, yeah, look, a great result. I think the Australian way has won there, and I think people should be rewarded for all the hard work they do over their working life. And the people have spoken.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. So it's quite topical that we're going to talk about pensions now leading into the end of the financial year.
And the situation was too that those who said, "Oh, why are pensioners getting free money?" They weren't getting free.
No, not at all.
The banks had already done the tax thing.
Yeah, and it was quite interesting on Monday after the election.
Yeah.
Most bank stocks jumped 8 to 9%.
Oh, huge amount, massive.
Yet in actual fact, as you say, the franking wasn't in question.
No.
They were going to pay the tax and distribute it to the investors anyway. It was the use of that money that had changed. Which is a very good indication that a very large portion of the population rely on those things to fund their lifestyle.
Well, why shouldn't they?
And so they should, exactly right.
They socked it away for years and years and years. They'd done the right thing and they were getting what they were supposed to get back at them, and it was going to be ripped from under them if a certain party had got
Correct, exactly. So today talking about pensions is quite coincidental because that's one of the key areas that obviously you can benefit from the use of franking credits and structuring your investments correctly to try and fund, and that's really another way people can think of a pension. It's a way of funding lifestyle. So we go from accumulating over our working life and putting money into the fund to then saying, okay, now I want to take a little bit out. And that's effectively what a pension is. There's no material change to the assets of a super fund.
No.
There is no need to change the underlying holdings. It is simply taking off the accumulation hat and putting on the pension hat with a few rules and contingencies that we'll talk about. But it's effectively that. It's just gaining access to what you've accumulated over your working life in a very, very concessionally taxed manner, so that you can do the things you want to do when you've finished working.
Look, Smith, you just touched on, and we'll do it in depth too in this half hour, about putting it away and how you get the best out of it, how you get your interest. But a pension isn't just for those who are retiring, is it?
No, look, not at all. And as I say,
it's a savings scheme.
Yeah, look, it's a way. It's just another strategy article.
Yeah.
As we say, you stack one strategy on top of another, you start to really get some momentum. And again, drawing an income stream. Gone are the days of this fallacy that retirement means professional death. And the more I work with people, the more you get to people to say, look, with all of the side hustles that are out there with the likes of Ubers and all these other things that you can do in your spare time, overlaid with technology, the attitude in the workforce at the moment is such that you could work from 65 to 70 doing the job you've always done, maybe just on terms that you prefer. So drawing an income stream or a pension is not a way of saying, okay, I'll never receive any more money. It's just a way of accessing, under a specific set of rules, the money that you've accumulated, and the tax implications are driven by the way that you retire or the way that you access the money and the age that you do it at. But you can then use that to fund other working opportunities, contracting, leisure interests, or anything that you could earn some money from or not, to be able to then do the things you want to do. Because I've got loads of clients that go, okay, I'm not going to do that job anymore. I'll start a pension. I'll use some of that pension to reduce my taxable income. And then I'll go off and I'll contract and do A, B, and C 3 days a week because that's my life.
That's it,
So you've got a pension on this side, you've got wages on the other side, and nothing's really changed. So it's just a funding mechanism or a way to access what you've actively been shoveling away for many, many years, provided you meet certain age thresholds. It's just a glorified bank account.
All right, that's right. But it's also a bank account you don't touch. Is that right, for the course of your working life?
Well, that's right. So obviously we accumulate superannuation. Obviously you need to meet your preservation age. And then once you do that, you attain retirement by saying, I've ceased gainful employment and I don't intend to return to the workforce. That then allows you the ability to take what you've accumulated and put into super and start to draw income from it. Now, there's two real key ways that money can come out. One's an account-based pension and one's a transition to retirement pension. And we've touched on both in previous shows, but effectively account-based pension is when you retire, and a transition to retirement pension is when you are still gainfully employed and working,
Right.
but accessing your benefits in a limited capacity.
Keyword transition.
Transition,
Right.
correct.
Yeah.
So an account-based pension says, I've retired. That now opens up the door to super. I start a pension, I draw my income. Now that might be weekly, monthly, fortnightly, once a year, depending on what else I'm working with resource-wise.
Okay, Luke, if you are working and you want to do that scheme, where's the balance there? What about taxation?
Yeah.
What about, that's
Yeah,
right.
so people that are gainfully employed, especially coming into the end of financial year, it's really quite advantageous to think about starting a pension. A lot of people say, well, why would I do that instead of July?
Yeah.
Because if you're over 60 and start a pension, the money that comes out is potentially, well, it is tax-free, with the exception of a few defined benefit schemes. But if we think in totality with a standard accumulation fund, I can be over 60, I can access my benefits whilst I'm working. Now that could be a really good way to find some money that you may not have to make a tax deductible contribution before the 30th of June. So tax-free money out of your super
Yeah.
to put your money back into your super and reduce your taxable income. That sounds
That's before
pretty
the
much
end of the financial
like
year.
a no-brainer to me,
Yeah.
because it's the same money. You don't even have to reach into an offset account,
No.
borrow some money from your partner, stop your wife buying a pair of shoes and use that money to throw it into super, because good luck selling that dream.
Yeah.
So pensions can be really good ways to fund other investment strategies. But from a transition perspective, you can still be gainfully employed, provided you've met your
Full-time
preservation age.
employment?
Yeah,
Okay.
full-time employment,
Right.
that's fine. You've met your preservation age, depending on your date of birth.
Right. What is the preservation age?
Well, it tiers.
Okay.
Anybody born pre-65,
Right.
it tiers from 55 to 60. Any born after that, it's 60 years of age.
Okay.
So if you're working on a full-time basis and you say, well, I wouldn't mind a little bit extra money, or wouldn't mind some money to make a contribution to super for myself or my spouse, you can start a pension over 60, draw between 4 and 10% of its capital value. Okay, that's one of the key differences between account-based and transition. Account-based, you can draw as much as you want because you've retired. Transition, they say, you're transitioning,
Right.
you can only have a
You can't
maximum
have everything.
of 10%.
Okay.
Now, little strategy out there for the listeners. If you do need some cash flow and you haven't retired, why not start a pension now, draw your 10% before June, then draw another 10% in July. New financial year, new 10%, two big chunks of cash. Over 60 tax-free, very good way to make a dent in the mortgage if you've got a little bit hanging around that you want to feel all warm and fuzzy about paying off.
Yeah.
Drop it in your offset account. So pensions are a good
Jeez,
thing,
a lot
not
of
just for
things in there.
retirement.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
really good funding
Yeah.
mechanisms, but the transition rules are very good because a lot of people don't want to stop work.
No.
They just don't necessarily want to do what they've done for 30 plus years, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
So transition legislation was introduced to say, well, we don't want to lose your skill set. So we're happy for you to do 2 days a week or 3 days
Does
a
it
week.
have to be in the job you've been doing all your life, or can you change?
No,
it?
anything.
All right.
Any form of gainful employment.
Okay.
We just generally find that people higher up in organisations have a huge amount of corporate knowledge that they'd love to stay and do, but they just don't want to work 40, 50 hours a week.
That could be a consultant or an advisor
exactly.
to a company.
Exactly.
So they're still gainfully employed.
Yep, you could do 2 or 3 days there and just draw a little bit of pension out to smooth out your wages or smooth out your lifestyle,
Yeah.
depending on how and when you want to do things. You may pull stumps and say, well, that's me, I'm never working again, and I've got enough to draw out, to fund my lifestyle.
Yeah.
You might have one spouse that's still working. We generally find that one side of a partnership might retire and then say, well, a bit like when I was a kid, I've got nobody to play with, so I might as well go back to work.
Yeah.
And back they trot, maybe contracting, consulting, or doing short-term work.
Yeah.
I'll do 3 months here, 6 months there. So,
All right.
pension's a great way to fund lifestyle.
And look, let's just go back over that 10% this financial year and 10% the start of the next financial
Yeah.
year.
So a transition to retirement, one of the key rules is, well, the first rule is, have I met my preservation age?
Right.
2, the maximum you can take in any one financial year is 10%. The minimum for people under 65 is 4%. So you must take 4%. So if we were there and we were going to say, well, I've got a job and I'm working full time, but I wouldn't mind funding a holiday in, say, October to Europe with the family, you could start a pension today. You could draw out 10%. If you're over 60, that money's going to be tax-free.
No.
If you're under 60, it'll depend on how the money went into super.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be fully taxable. So you'd pull out if you got your $1 million, turn on your pension, pull out 100. 1st of July rolls around,
Do it
the
again.
value of your account is now 900,000. Let's whip 90,000 out on the 2nd of July. There's 190,000 out tax-free You're still working on a full-time
Bye
basis.
bye in October.
Bye-bye in October, or dump, throw it back, or chunks of it back into super to maximise your tax deductions.
And you could do that now. You could do that today.
Look, you've only got to ring and try and get an appointment at the moment. It's that time of year.
Yeah.
Barb's pulling her hair out because we're trying to get money out, we're trying to get money in, we're trying to maximise deductions.
Yeah.
Because Murphy's Law says you can tell people this till they're blue in the face, and they'll start thinking about it middle of June.
That's right. And you can contact Envision Financial. You can visit them, have a cup of cocoa. Barbie's an expert at that. 4452 Townsend Street down the end. It's in Phillip, and you can ring it now on 62604749. Luke Smith. Pension, what's it all about? Are you using yours fruitfully? And are you gaining the lifestyle you want in your later life? Maybe not. We'll solve the problems as it's hard. Financial in Townsend Street. You can call them now and book it 62604749. Luke, back in the days, when there was no paper when my children think I was born. When you said pension, you thought to yourself, I've got to be 65 before I can get any money and live well.
Correct.
But that's not the it's not like that.
Very much so, and the two get gelled together very easily just by misconception.
Yeah.
The age pension kicks off from 65, depending on how old you are, moving up to 67. That has nothing to do with when you access your super.
Yeah.
So if you're born within a certain date range, we go from 55 to 60, and that generally rolls on an 18-month window. 55, 56, 57, 58,
Right.
59. Anybody over 1965, 60.
All right.
Okay? That is not age pension.
Yep.
So
That's got nothing to do with the government giving you
Nothing.
something.
That's a
because you're
completely
old.
separate test.
Totally different thing.
completely
Two
separate
different
assessment.
paths, totally different rules.
Exactly.
One you don't get tax benefit on, the other you do.
Correct, and that's right. So this is about saying, okay, how can I access what I've accumulated, not what the government is going to give me? That's a good way of people to think about it. What have I accumulated against what is the government going to give me?
Yeah.
So you need to meet the preservation age and then say, okay, how can I use a pension structure to benefit my current situation, and then use this to try and stack some strategies on top of each other to be able to then really get some momentum. And, as I say, quite topical this time of year, to be leading into 30 June, it's important to get funds into super. So as I said earlier, using a pension as a funding mechanism to increase your deductible contributions. That's for people in normal super funds, that's for people in the PSS, CSS, DFRDB and MSBS. Everybody has the opportunity to put in up to $25,000,
Yes.
including your employer contributions.
We've said this before, haven't we? Beware of that. If the employers put in that 20,000 and you put 25 in,
Yep.
you're stuffed.
There's tears and they're not going to be mine.
No, that's it too. How much can you put into your pension fund?
Well, you can put an unlimited amount of money in,
Right.
but it depends how it goes in.
All right, that's
That's
a
right. So
detail, isn't it?
that's right. So the $25,000 concessional cap is what we're just talking about. Your employer contributions and your deductible contributions. A non-concessional contribution, which was another win as the fallout of the election, is we're not going to reduce that contribution cap, which is great. So that's $100,000 a year. So this is a good time to be thinking about starting pensions to make deductible contributions, finding other assets or cash to build up your super balances using a non-concessional contribution. This time of year, people should be thinking about putting money into superannuation to lock the tax-free components of their pension.
Right.
So if I throw $100,000 into super and I start a pension with that money is locked as a tax-free component for the life of that income stream. Even if it grows to 200,000, 300,000, 400,000.
And age doesn't matter in this.
Age doesn't matter.
That's something to consider. Don't
That's
think
right.
at 65 it's all going to come to a halt because
Correct.
the government's going to say, oh, you've got enough money.
No, that's right.
That's not the way.
That's right. So that's a separate assessment, as we said. Some other things people should be thinking about, obviously, the transition rules, as we touched on earlier. Can you access that for other opportunities? Can you make sure that you are potentially offsetting any personal assets that you've sold during the year? And we touched on this a couple of weeks ago. If I sold an investment property this year, you may want to have a chat to your accountant and say, well, could I use some of those proceeds to make a deductible contribution to super to help try and limit the tax impact of the asset that I've sold if there was a gain involved?
Sure.
So there's a really good way to have access to capital. And if you do turn around and say, right, 30 June, I'm lucky enough to retire and this is me for the end of days, then you can start a pension on the 1st of July. And the other thing people need to remember in relation to a pension is it doesn't have to be fortnightly. It's not the age pension. It's not a defined benefit pension like CSS and PSS. The term pension is really just thinking about taking an agreed amount of money out of an account. Now, if you take that out on a weekly basis, a fortnightly basis, a monthly basis, a semi-annual basis, or an annual basis, you use a pension drawing to fund the lifestyle that you want to have, taking into account what you need and where you get your money from.
Does it have to be the same amount all the time?
No, look, you can
You
cut and
have a
change
windfall
this.
or something.
Yeah, look, we know we've got some clients that, you know, we're paying annual pensions at the moment.
Yeah.
We've got some that take it weekly. We've got some that take it monthly.
So you can set that up.
Yeah, you can control, provided the fund you're in allows you that flexibility, you can then draw an income stream at any rate, provided that you get to the end of the financial year and you've at least met the minimum for your age. So sub 65 must take 4%.
Yeah.
65 to 75,
10.
5%.
10.
So it just starts to
When does it
ratchet
go up to 10?
Oh, I think you've got to be 115.
Okay. Not likely.
Not likely.
Yeah.
So, you know, there are some rules we need to adhere to,
Yeah.
because the biggest benefit of a pension, I guess we leave this for last. Once you put that pension hat on and you have an account-based pension, so I've retired from the workforce,
Yeah.
I've met a condition of release, and I'm starting an income stream. No tax inside the account at all. So you could have $1 million generating 60,000,
Nothing.
70,000 of dividends, 80,000 income and capital. You could have CBA shares go from $4 to $400, and you sell them, no capital gains tax.
So you can get your franking credits, no tax on
And
it.
this is where franking credits have value,
That's
because this is why I've had a box of Kleenex on my desk for the last 3 months.
Yeah.
You know, if a pension structure is tax-free, and you've got $1 million in your account, and you've generated $10,000 of franking credits, when you lodge your tax return, the super fund accountant says, we've earned $50,000, what's the tax on that? 0. What did that $50,000 generate in by way of franking credits? $10,000. Okay, the ATO will cut you a check, and when your tax return is lodged, you get that money back. And that's why so many people were upset, because it was effectively real money.
That's it.
It was lifestyle money, it was holiday money, it was car money,
That's
it was
right.
horse
And
money.
the tax had already been paid on it anyway.
It's effectively taking advantage of a structure which, and you know, a pension is, it's tax free. So get as much in there as you can, up to legislated limits, taking into account the transfer balance cap, but that's a discussion for another day. And make the most of your income structure, because if you're not making the most of dividends and income and franking credits in a pension account, you're robbing yourself of good, strong, reoccurring income.
Okay, you want to set up a pension, you can do it now.
Oh, you can do it anytime, that's right. So if you've got accumulated super,
Rule number one.
rule number 1, make sure you're preservation age. Okay, so check your date of birth, see when you can get your money.
Yeah.
2, have you quit or are you still working? If you've quit, you can start an account-based pension. If you're still working, think about a transition to retirement pension. If we go down that transition rule, must take the minimum, can't take more than the maximum, being 10% of the value when you started it. Leading into the end of the financial year, it works on a bit of a pro-rated basis,
Right.
but from 1 July, you'd be looking at 10% for that entire financial year, however, whenever. Now, the little tip is, if you want to double dip this time of year, kick it off now, whip your 10% out,
Yep.
take another 10% first week of July,
Bang.
you've got 2 years of pension money, or 20% of your super balance, out to you potentially on a tax-free basis in the space of 5 weeks.
And we'll see you on a holiday in October.
Happy
You
days.
can get all this on many sites, can't
True,
you?
yeah, that's right,
Yeah.
exactly. So we've got the strategy stacker.
Yeah.
Luke Talks Money on iTunes. Obviously, we've got Envision Financial Canberra on YouTube, where we've got footage of the show and the key takeouts that people can watch and wind back and take some notes. And obviously, you can come to the website, www.envisionfinancial.com.au, and they can go there to the Knowledge Centre, which will have articles, stories, videos on all these sorts of
stuff.
technicalities, and
Yeah.
they can drown themselves
On
in it
your own
over a
time.
cold
You can
weekend.
do it on your own time too. It's a long weekend. This is the time to do it.
If it's 11 degrees outside, why not learn about
Right.
transition retirement pensions?
And best of all, you can see Barb and Luke at Envision Financial at 52 Townsend Street in Phillip. You can ring them now, 626, this is for you, Bev, 6260 4749. Happy weekend.
Thanks, buddy.